All right, we're gonna learn this section about completing the square. So, just a few quick problems on how to complete the square. Um, First, I guess the first problem is not necessarily completing the square, but it kind of the first property that we need to learn so we can complete the square, or learn how to apply completing the square. We need to kind of learn how to do the square root property. So, just a quick problem. I'm just using the square root property. I have x squared minus 10x plus 25 is equal to 12. I guess in this particular situation, I have, I still have a quadratic on the left, and then I have a number on the right. It's kind of a thinking ahead of time, but notice the x squared minus 10x plus 25 actually factors down into a perfect square. If you notice that this factors into x minus 5 quantity squared, or I suppose, which this means this. Hopefully everybody knows what that means, the same thing. So, but I'm going to write it like this because I'm going to be able to use the square root property to solve for the value of x. So what undoes a square? Well, square root does. So if I square root both sides, I get, that cancels itself out, and all I have left is the square root of 12, which is actually 2 square roots of 3. Okay, so, and then I suppose you could say plus or minus 2 square roots of 3. And then add 5 over the other side, so then I have 5 plus or minus 2 square roots of 3. So, simple as that. Use the square root property and then come up with my solution here for the values of x. And notice I have two possible solutions right here. This is 5 plus 2 square roots of x, or 2 square roots of 3, or 5 minus 2 square roots of 3. So I still have my two possible solutions for the value of x. Just written a little bit differently right here. So, all right. Well, obviously it's not always going to be the case where it's going to be easy for me to write this left side as a perfect square. So that's where completing the square comes in. If I can complete the square, then I can use the square root property to solve the problem. So let's see if we can't find a problem that you need to complete the square. So I have x squared plus 4x minus 12 plus 4x equals 0. And I want to solve this by completing the square. So obviously 12 is not a perfect square. So I'm just going to add it to the other side. So just to kind of get it out of there, I want to put a space here, and then I'm going to put the 12 over here. So I add the 12 over. And now my goal is to make this left side a perfect square. So I can square root it, and then, I could do what I did previously to the previous problem. Well, to do that, I take half of the b value, and I square it. Okay, I take half of the b value and I square it. So half of 4 is 2. 2 squared is 4. So now this is the tricky part. I guess I'm adding 4 here. Now if I just randomly add 4 to one side of the equation, what do I have to do to the other side? I have to add 4 to the other side. So notice I'm adding 4 to both sides. Well, what does that allow me to do here? Well, that allows me to write this as a perfect square. If I'd factor this, I'd have two factors, x plus 2 times x plus 2, which I write it as x, the quantity x plus 2 quantity squared, equals 16. Okay? Now, factoring this into a situation like this, that allows me to use my square root property like I did before. So again, I'm going to use the square root property, the square root both sides. I end up, the square root undoes the square, so that's easy. I get plus or minus 4 here. And then subtracting 2 from both sides, I have x equals negative 2 plus or minus 4. Or I suppose you could say negative 2 plus 4 is x equals 2, or x equals negative 2 minus 4 is negative 6. So there's your solutions. There's completing the square. So had to complete the square. All right, let's see if we can't do another one real quick. All right, here's another problem. I want to solve this problem by completing the square, okay? Notice that I have a leading coefficient here in this particular situation, okay? So before I can use completing the square, I need to get rid of this 3. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide everything, the whole entire equation, divide by 3. So if I divide each and everything, divide by 3, notice what I get. I just get x squared minus, 2/3 x minus 1/3 is equal to 0. And now I can go through, and it makes it a little crappier, obviously, because of these values here. But I can go through and I can solve, or I can complete the square with this. So it's going to be a little bit more difficult since I'm dealing with fractions, but let's see what happens. Okay, so the first step, what I enjoy doing, or what I like doing, is I like taking taking this value, since it's not a perfect square, I'm going to move it to the other side, and I'm going to call it positive 1/3, obviously, and then this is a space. So my goal is to figure out what goes in this space right here. Remember, you take the b value, the coefficient, so 2/3 divided by 2. So when divided by 2 or multiply it times 1/2. So I have 2/3 divided by 2 or times 1/2, which is the 1/3, and then square it. Okay. Then I got to square this value, which is 1/9. So I'm sorry. 1/9. Okay, square this. I square the top, square the bottom, I get 1/9 there. So 1/9 goes there, and then I also add whatever I add to that side, I also have to add to this side. So 1/9 goes here as well. So what does that allow me to do? Well, that should allow me to write this thing as a perfect square. Notice what I get put in here. Okay. 1/3 is what goes inside the parentheses. If you ever get confused on that, it's whatever value that you get that's squared. So this value here that I'm squaring to get my 1/9, well, that's what goes inside here. Okay, so my 1/3, it's minus because my middle term has to be negative. So this has got to be a minus. X minus 1/3 quantity squared is equal to, the sum here would be, this would be 3/9, 4/9. This is going to turn out to be pretty cool, actually, because now that I square root, I'm going to square root both sides. I'm going to have x minus 1/3 is equal to, this actually turns out even. It's going to be plus or minus 2/3, because the square root of 4 is 2, the square root of 3, the square root of 9 is 3. So plus or minus 2/3. And then just add over 1/3, and there's your answer, I guess. So I suppose you could have x equals 1 or x equals a negative 1/3. So there's your solution. Notice how we started that problem. If your coefficient's not 1, if it's not a 1x squared, then you need to make it that. Okay? So notice how we started that situation. All right. Okay, so just some try this problems here that I want you to try. There's 2 of them. Solve by completing the square. Okay, I'm throwing a curveball at you here on number 1. Okay, just think it over when you're taking the square root of things. Okay, think it over a little bit. Find all solutions. So that means real solutions or imaginary solutions. I want you to find all the solutions. Okay, so that one's going to be a little tricky for you. All right, and then number 2 should be similar to the one that we've done just recently. So good luck.